Welcome to the Hidden Bookcase. Come through and get cozy. Pick a book, your favourite book, that's the one that opens this room. Inside you'll find a warm fire, a loving cat, and a wide skylight to the stars.
And a dangerously high to-be-read pile.
I'm Morgan, I use they them pronouns, and I am she whose gracious presence illuminates the room like the edge shine of a knife.
I'm Soren, I use he, him pronouns, and I am trying to be a mirror.
I'm Anna, I use she, her pronouns, and I am at your service. May your reign be a radiant blaze upon the void.
Soren and I have been friends for over a decade, and the two of us are always swapping books.
Each fortnight, the two of us, sometimes with help from a friend, take it in turns to recommend one another a favourite read. The first-time reader tells us what they know about the book, makes some predictions about what they don't, and then we discuss our thoughts with all of you bookworms. This summer, we're reading about sapphics in space.
So today, let's get to talking about...
A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine.
So today, we are here with somebody who, for once, we can be like, yeah, we actually have known this person for 10 years as well.
That's true.
It's very exciting.
To be fair, I feel like you've known each other for 10 years. I knew of you.
Yes, and I knew of you.
Yes. I saw you.
We absolutely saw each other. We met over 10 years ago.
Made eye contact across the room 10 years ago.
Yeah. Known Morgan since 2012.
Yeah, because you were a baby.
You
Literally
were also
7.
a baby. I was just more of a baby.
I was year 8, thank you very much. I was a whole year older than you. Thank you very much. Well, 11 months, but it's fine.
But we haven't actually said who this person who we've known for 10 years is.
This is Anna.
Hi.
We've known each other since secondary school. We did theatre tech together. We did the Attic Monologues together.
Yes. I was with you at the start of that venture, and I'm so glad to see it doing so well. And if you are listening to this and you haven't listened to that, go listen to that. I hear the editing in season 2 gets really good. Preference, that's when it stops being me. That's how we know me.
That's how we know Anna.
And then Soren also knows Anna, because I dragged her to D&D, and then we all bonded.
I must have talked to you at secondary school. We had conversations, sure. I don't remember any of them, quite frankly.
I don't remember
remember
much
secondary school?
school.
God.
Yeah. It's just fragments of memory. There's people that I'm like, I absolutely had many, many conversations with you before you made an imprint in my brain.
And speaking of memories making an imprint in your brain,
Oh,
He's segueing.
Anna's here to talk about.
A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine.
And how did you find out about this book?
So many years ago, I was on Tumblr and I read one of those recommendations of sci-fi books and fantasy books, and then there's like a subsection in it that's sapphic, sci-fi, and fantasy. And so I had this, and I had it saved, like screenshotted, etc., for a time when I had time to read books. And I finally got around to this one. I think I'd gotten it as a gift for someone, knowing that the description matched their reading type before I'd read it myself, and they loved it, which is useful. And then I finally got around to reading it, and I adored it. And I was like, I cannot wait to talk about this with people who actually studied English and might recognize some of the poetic terms listed here before Googling them, and also would appreciate, the poetry of aspects of it. And I enjoy the concept in the language of like a language that is poetical by instinct, kind of, in the way that the grammar works and the way that everyone talks. That sounds really acoustically pleasing.
It's like iambic pentameter for English.
Exactly.
Which is very fun.
It's very nice.
Yeah, we're throwing in those terms already. We're getting the English terms in there.
Can you tell us what A Memory Called Empire is about?
Okay, so your main character is an aspiring young ambassador to the empire that they have romanticized in their mind their whole life. As the dedication will list, this book is dedicated to anyone who has ever fallen in love with a culture that was devouring their own. And so this main character headed off to be an ambassador to the empire that is threatening to annex their home. And they get there and there is political intrigue. They have to deal with the previous ambassador being dead.
Blind. Let's do the blind. Morgan, what do you know about A Memory Called Empire?
I know that it is political sci-fi. I know that it is sapphic. Maybe there's a murder mystery.
Okay.
Language. I've been told it's like poetry-based language system or something like that. Anna came into my DMs and was like, bestie, I'm not going to tell you about this book until after you finish your dissertation, but just so you know.
That sounds amazing.
This. And then wouldn't tell me the title until after I'd finished my diss. Which was some more devastating, I would argue.
Yeah.
So I just had to sit there being like, what do you mean? What do you mean? And and maybe I'm misremembering, but something to do with poetry.
I know nothing more than you apart from the fact that I think it's in space because we're doing it for this month.
That was implied, Sovereign.
I don't know anything else. This is all I've got.
I think there's aliens. It's giving The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet if that wasn't cozy.
I'm gonna go no aliens. That's gonna be my prediction. I feel like it's humans who have evolved new, distinct cultures, etc. But I'm gonna say no aliens. There's something about this cover that makes me think that it's AI generated. I know that it's not. It's just like, I don't know.
It's given it slightly.
It's the painterly style and the very distant figures, and I'm sorry if I've insulted the illustrator. These are two sapphics on the cover.
Ooh, I feel like potentially.
I feel like Throne Person might actually be ancient, though, based on the hair, but it's also really difficult to see. It could just be platinum blonde. What are our insane predictions?
I don't know if this is going to be spicy, but I think because of when we're recording this, my brain's like, space orgy.
For reference, we are recording this right after having finished doing a Power Unbound. Sure.
I don't know. Magic.
Magic.
There we
You
go.
think this is SFF?
I can dream.
I'm not going to go that direction. I think we're going to... Maybe it's also because we just recorded a Power Unbound, but I think there's going to be a big power imbalance between the sapphics in the relationship. Like maybe one of them is a servant of the Empire and one of them is a daughter of the Empire, or something like that. I think there's going to be some yearning, possibly maybe they're on opposite sides of a war or something like that. That's not wild enough, but that's what I'm getting the vibe of. What's wild? I think memory is going to be literally an important plot device, like reliving memories or rewatching memories or something like that. Like maybe people are sharing memories or something, like putting people into other people's memories to try and make some kind of point.
Also, I have read the dedication of this book.
Oh, what's the dedication?
This book is dedicated to anyone who has ever fallen in love with a culture that was devouring their own.
Ooh, okay. That's interesting.
So it's giving impressions or memory of Empire.
I'm doubling down on my opposite sides of the war gas then.
I would double down on the servant/daughter of the Empire prediction.
I think it could be both.
Why not both?
I'm loving how you have opposite opinions on aliens, but you're both right.
To be fair, I forgot about my aliens prediction. The aliens just show up randomly halfway through as reference. You're like, oh yeah, okay, it's all human cultures. And then they're like, the Abrekti. And you're like, hang on a sec. I need to readjust my worldview. I was not aware we were doing aliens anymore. I mean, based on like the cover of the second book, it makes a lot more sense for there to be aliens. But still.
I love how I just haven't properly looked at covers.
It's so pretty. I love the Sun Throne.
They are pretty. We were right that it wasn't the girlfriends.
Technically, it was the gays. Technically.
That's true. What is that? Iskander?
Well, even if it's not, Mahit has Iskander's Margot.
He's in there. He's in there somehow.
And he's making Mahit feel things. So
When they did the whole like reveal that he had slept with the Emperor, I was like, did you not already know that?
this bisexual man has been bisexualing to every like important character you've met, and you're just surprised that he managed to seduce the Emperor.
Ambassador boy.
I love that for him. Honestly, an icon. He died doing what he loved.
The fact that he's like, you guys murdered me, but I'm not that mad about it. It's like, I get it. Anyway, I'm very proud of my memory guess. I was extrapolating. I saw that title. I was like,
Plot device. Literally a plot device, though. I love it.
Let me talk about the Amargos for a second. Oh my god. Margot got me very excited as a classics student because I did this module called Roman Death in second year. So we learned about this festival in ancient Rome called the Parentalia. It was a 9-day festival where you sort of honour your ancestors, and involved in that was this procession where you all wear this thing called an imago, or like people wear things called imagos, which are these funeral masks of your ancestors that just hang in your house for the rest of the year. And then you like don them and you're supposed to like sort of like embody like that self of like the past. So as soon as I saw the word imago, I was like, oh, we're getting like actual like well-researched classics brain things. And it just made my entire self so happy.
Because the author is a historian classicist, a historian of the Byzantine Empire, and a city planner.
that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
We predicted that they would be on opposite sides of a war, which was kind of incorrect.
One is of the Empire and one is not, but the one who's of the Empire is fully helping the other one. So,
But is also like not really getting it a fair amount of the time.
yeah.
Being like, yeah, you know, like if you were one of us, I'd still like you. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to count the microaggressions. Sure. stressful. I liked it.
That was kind of halfway between microaggression and not. Like, from Mahit's perspective, she was like, oh, I'm happy that you said that. I'm also heartbroken that you said that because
Yeah.
you're completely undermining my identity, but also not necessarily fetishizing me as something other.
It really walked this sort of like interesting discussion, which I've not really seen done accurately or with good intent in media before. Because I feel like in a lot of media, especially when you have like cultural divide, it will be like so badly handled. And I feel like this is just, it like understands what it's talking about. And it's actually like exploring it in an interesting way. But also my heart was breaking every single time.
It's a tumultuous romance.
Yeah, I have to say, the fact that it wasn't the focus and it wasn't sort of like enemies to lovers or like star-crossed thing, it was very much sort of like incidental. I really liked that. I've missed that from fiction because everything right now is just fantasy romance or romantic fantasy, or even when it's normal fantasy, it's still got a romance. Whereas this was just sort of like an adult romance where they just sort of like, they like each other.
They're doing and then that also happens, you know?
Yeah. It was so refreshing.
And they're mostly reasonably focused on the goals in front of them and not getting distracted in ways that are not believable, if that makes sense. Like, no matter how much you like somebody, if someone's trying to stab you...
They're not horny teenagers, despite being adults.
Exactly.
What else was in the predictions?
I only left the AI thing in because I thought it was funny that the city was an AI, so I decided to leave that in the edit. I was like, we were onto something. Got the right answer with the wrong equation.
The actual world is built by an AI, so maybe the artist understood the assignment.
But the world is the world is the world. The world is the world and the empire and the city all in one word, and I just find that fascinating from an empirical standpoint. Yes. But like...
language world building.
Exactly, the things you can toy with language world building.
Oh, it's so fun. And I think they did it in a really good way here, because you could be really heavy on the use of conlang, which I think could be quite alienating, haha, and not necessarily very accessible. But in stopping the narrative to explain like the connotations of a certain word, like at one point, Mahit gets called smart and is offended, and then is told, well, you've been clever this whole time, but the clever connotation is used for animals rather than people. And she's like, oh, I'm just being subtly dehumanized here. It's really fun to have that stuff folded in without necessarily... Because I don't even think, even if you did conlang something, you can't get connotation. You do lose a lot of things.
Exactly. And there's only so many words that are actually not in English. It's a lot of the time in text clanly, the words and the phrases are this, that, the other, but you're not getting, in the majority of those instances, a word that you've never seen before used frequently. You have titles happening like that for the most part, and I think that's it.
You have explanations of things like this same glyph being used for 8 leap and 8 antidotes names as being like a mark of respect, and then therefore you have by extension the fact that there are different glyphs for different numbers, which is fun.
You have 36 all-terrain tundra vehicle, my beloved.
Which is so good.
Exactly.
And the fact that this author can make you laugh at like an in-joke in the language within like 30 pages is fantastic.
And that's the bit where you get a little bit of incidental, not the focus of the scene, light-hearted, slight flirting there between the later couple together. And it's nice and cute and subtle, to my mind at least. And I don't think I necessarily clocked it the first time through.
I didn't know like anything about it going in, so I was like, who's the romance going to be? I don't think it's 19 ads, but I could be proved wrong.
Yeah, there's the vibes, and there's the fun instance of how the imago comes into that, of like Yaskander's endocrine system making he doesn't get any of the benefits of the imago of help, but just is further hampered in the role by his attraction to her. I found that funny. Nice implications of what would come about from the machinery, and it's like that there's a lot of depth into how it would evolve and how it would work, which I find really fascinating as a scientist.
I do love the little aside as well about like the psychological counselling on Lucelle and the fact that people do ridiculous things like try to take their dead lovers' imargos or try to reconnect with people having had an imago. It's fun. There's so much potential drama. You could get so many novels out of this, just this idea. And also feel like it would have been very easy to do a really simple, like the Emperor could easily have just done like a lich thing and just been like, I want to live forever because I'm the best and I'm afraid of dying. But he actually kind of has sort of credible reasons to want to do this, even though it's really messed up, which I was appreciative of. I was like, this is much more interesting than him just being like, I fear death. Like, he does fear death, but he fears death because he's like, well, death will bring political instability, and I don't want that. And I was like, okay, you know, in this scenario, I can see where you're coming from. You still shouldn't do it.
Have you considered a political successor who is not you and training them in advance of dying?
Have you considered we shouldn't have one head of state who is chosen by the previous head of state or a coup? Those are the two options that you have.
The little insights back home into the council and all of the intrigue going on there, and the sort of like we've known each other for ages and we understand each other, but we also kind of hate each other. Oh, I was loving it. Yeah.
The in-universe dispatches and literature and posters.
Beautiful. I love that. And the fact that we got one from the Empire and one from Elsel every single time. Oh, yes. Eating it up. I will read history books about fake places. Like, I won't read actual history books, but just like, I don't know what it is, but as soon as it's not real, I'm like, oh my God, yeah.
I think, and I've thought about it a lot, I'm trying to rack it down. It's sort of, if you're reading it in a fiction book, you know that the history is, or either it's encompassing the truth of the fact, or it's deliberately got layers of intended, like, this person is lying about this in the history books for this reason. Whereas in real life, if you have to think about all that, it just makes you sad.
This is true. Yeah. There's the author intent, which is, yeah.
And if you like read a horrific piece of propaganda, you're like, well, it's not real, even if it's based on real things.
Exactly. Even if it's a commentary on real things, it's not in this instance real. It won't make me as sad.
Speaking of, I have to talk about my favourite thing in this book. I was walking around in my bedroom, cleaning, listening to the audiobook, and I literally had to stop and like flap my hands repeatedly and be like, this is the best thing I've ever read. And it was the poem at the climax, and the fact that they like just use it and then it gets taken onto the streets and then it gets taken by the emperor. And when he read it on stage, that was when I literally had to just stand there still and just take in the scene, because I was like, this is the best thing that has ever happened. Oh my God. Like, I just felt chills all over my body. I was like, this is perfect as a climax to a book. Like, it could not have been better. You could see exactly what was going to happen. It was like all going towards it.
They've done all the setup as well with bringing it in at the beginning.
It's fake propaganda. And you're still getting chills. You're like, oh my God, because like, yeah, this meant this, but then he's repurposing it for this, but it still has meaning, and now it has a new meaning, and it's being taken up by different causes. The language, poetry, fantasy writer in me was like, Jesus Christ, I need to lie down.
The linguistic strength you need to manufacture that just evolution of language through that method is...
Like, the way it built. And then, like, Mahit getting to see it and being like, my poem will be in history books. And I'm not even, like, properly being able to register that, being like, but you know that because you know what matters to her. And you've seen her, like, wanting to be part of this history. And then you see that take off, one of the biggest moments in Texlanli history in, like, hundreds of years. Ha! I could never. Leave some talent for the rest of us, Arkady Martine. Leave some talent for the rest of us.
And I do love how they do the setup of like everything is about not just poetry in specifics, but like poetic meaning and like symbolic meaning. And then therefore him doing that is what ends the coup. You know, you're inundated enough in that culture that it makes sense to you at that point. Like if you explain this to somebody out of context and like, oh, the emperor kills himself and then that stops the thing because then his successor becomes more valid, people would be like, what do you mean? But it's like, no, it's because of their values. Do you understand?
This, like, literally, like, is the thing that will start the war, but in a different direction. Like, this is the thing that the entire empire needed to unite them. It's the only thing that could have united them. It's perfectly situated. I wanted to read the sequel, like, immediately after, and then I was like, no, I have to treat this as, like, a single book. I can't come in with, like, excess knowledge. So I've just been sitting there, and literally the moment this recording ends, it's open up. I'm ready to go. I've written it out in my bullet journal already.
Does A Memory Cooled Empire constitute dark academia? Not technically set at a university, but it's set like in an intellectual environment, you know?
I did add it to my academia-esque shelf on Goodreads, so I'm gonna say yes. Yeah, I don't like to like differentiate like dark and light academia. I just call academia-esque to be like, it has all the aesthetics of like the academia genre, we'll say, but a lot of purists would be like, oh, well, it's not set at university. It's not about like classics, all of the like references are really modern. Like people will pick those things apart and I'm like, shut up. It's academia. It's just not your version of academia, because academia has lots of problems with classism and with all of that stuff. So like, shut up.
Yeah.
It's dark academia. Or it's academia-esque. I'm saying that it's gonna pick up. That's gonna be like a term that everyone uses in like 5 years. But academia has a problem with elitism, and so like the inherent thing of trying to be like, well, that's not dark academia, but this is because of XYZ. Anything can be academia if you try hard enough.
Even if you're referencing things that aren't real.
Exactly. Well, I had this argument with a friend like a few years ago, and he was talking about how he doesn't like modern references in things. He doesn't like it when they reference like Tesco or The Big Bang Theory in like literature. And I said, well, but you're a theology student and you really like, you know, all those like biblical references and sort of like looking at Paradise Lost and all the references that has. So like the only difference between those references and modern references is the elitism, the fact that they've been around for longer and they are more widely recognized. And he genuinely was like, oh my God, you're so right. And like, I actually changed my own mind about that works, because sometimes I'm a little bit like, really? Really? They're going to go into a Starbucks? Are you serious? And now I'm like, no, this is just like our version of like citing these different things. Just because you're referencing modern things doesn't mean it's not as valid. Like referencing the Bible and referencing the Priory of the Orange Tree are still, like, obviously different amounts of dissemination, arguably, in the world, maybe.
This is the same Anna that recommended that, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like you should take credit for that, because we have done that on the show.
Sapphic Rex, go to Anna. We trust.
Do people like the writing style?
Yes.
I'm phrasing it in a very like... Anna, tell us about the writing style. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I can only vibe with it, because I don't know the words that are meant to describe what this writing style is. I just know it compels me.
That's all we need.
I love the dry humor of the writing style. Like, it took me a while to be like, oh, actually, this is like really funny. Like, it's really sort of like witty.
This made me laugh multiple times when walking around in public listening to the audiobook, so that was great.
Like, Maha as a like narrator is just so sort of like done. Like, just the whole thing is like, and we're doing this now. Okay, well, anyway, I'm going to bed. And I'm like, I love this for you. And then the interludes are very sort of like, and now here, look at this
Conspiracy.
Whoa. I love the tone of the writing style. What about you, Sarah?
I like how rooted in Mahit we are. Maybe this is just a symptom of reading a lot of YA that sort of like shoves a bunch of violence in and kind of sweeps things under the rug. But she's very much remembering that she's been in pain for whatever reason. Like if she was in an explosion 24 hours ago, she's like, my hip still hurts. Or even 48 hours later, she's like, I'm trying to run and this is bothering me now. Or throughout the entire novel, she's nervous about food, even though she knows that Iskander was probably deliberately killed and that it might have been nothing to do with food. Because she has that image in her head, she's still stressed about it. And it's like, yes, you would be. You'd be thinking about it the whole time before you ate anything. Like, she just feels so credibly real in like those little ways where it's like, yeah, that's what someone who's in this situation would be thinking about. That's what they would be snagging on.
And in her defense, she goes out for dinner and like her dinner partner is blown to pieces. So like she has multiple reasons to be like, let's maybe not go for dinner.
Then she goes out with Three Seagrass and Three Seagrass is eating like the world's bloodiest steak and she's like, this is kind of hot, but also we don't do that. So
Also, I'm going to make another case for the academia thing. The fact that they're like student vibing, they're having ice cream on the lawn after having like not like slept at all. And they're just napping on the lawn. Just like the fact that they're basically political fugitives and they're like ice cream in the sun.
And even pre that, they do the like pot noodle equivalent in space of like, it's actually a dumpling equivalent, I think, if I'm recalling correctly, where they're like, this is the fast food that you get because it's nutritious and you eat it quickly and it's tasty. And then you just keep working because no one has time to stop working.
Honestly, the academia allegations write themselves. I'm dying on this hill. I loved that sort of student vibe. I loved it so much. It was so like, wow, I can see that this author has pulled so many all-nighters in the library. I've been there, babes.
This one isn't a quote, but it's a note. And it's sort of, I don't know if it's directly foreshadowing or not towards how the book ends. But from the onset, now when we meet 19 ads, it's sort of like this person who the light is summoned to them, kind of they shine in a room. And for a culture that is so very blatantly about the sun and radiant. I feel like that's just so nice, very cool harmony with the themes of how she ends up being the Empress.
Like, the prose is very simple, actually, but it's consistently gorgeous. Like, the descriptions of the gold veins running through the city that power the algorithm, and all of the floating gardens and things.
There's such a good balance between like description and like voice and internal monologue and external monologue. I feel like it's so well balanced. I will say it took me so long to read the first half of this just because I have not read like high sci-fi, possibly in years, I want to say. I only read audiobooks at the moment, so I've forgotten how to read full stop. So I was wading through this book being like, I'm enjoying this so much, but at what cost? And then I started listening to the audiobook about halfway through, and I literally finished it in like a few hours. I was flying.
Yeah, I also had to do the switch, partially just because of busyness, honestly. Like, I needed to be able to listen on the way to the opticians and things, and I can't read. Well, I could, but I feel like I would get run over. I will say, if you're having trouble with the conlang aspects, or with the fact that there's a lot of new words that you might not be able to pronounce and things, listening to it is very useful for that. And even just to get into sort of the rhythm of the prose. And the audiobook narrator does do a gorgeous job.
I do remember the first time I read it, it took me so long to read, but I was loving every second of it, but it was taking me a minute. And then the second time I read it, I did read it faster because it was refreshing the memory instead of building all of because it's got so much world building so beautifully conveyed, but it does take you have to engage your brain.
Yeah, if you were like reading this right before going to sleep, I feel like it would be difficult. I did never choose to read it at that time of the day for that reason. I was like, I'll forget everything when I wake up.
Yeah, that's kind of the only time I read now, so it probably explains why I was struggling. I feel like it's one of those things where like with fantasy novels you accept that you just have to just go with it for the first 100 pages, but especially with a lot of like modern fantasy novels, there's a lot of like things you can fall back on knowing, like it's basically set in medieval Europe and there's going to be dragons and the magic system has at least some level of this normal logic to it. Whereas with sci-fi and with like non-Western like SFF, I feel like because we've retrod the same like European ground so much, you're actually being exposed to new things and like actual world building, and you're like, I actually have to think now because I've not like experienced this before.
Yeah, I'm going to need to remember what's written here because it'll be foundational to how this world works. And I want to know it and it'll give you good context for everything going forward, but I need to remember it because I need to digest it now.
I can't rely on the fact that there's going to be a dragon on page 200 and then a blowing up like the city on page 405.
Go read Priory of the Orange Tree, please. There's a really good review of it on this podcast.
I like that it's not, I think some sci-fi, I mean, some fantasy can do this too, but I feel like I see it more in sci-fi, I'm not sure, goes into this overly explanatory, like, humans left the Earth at this year, and I'm going to tell you everything, and it's like, I don't need to know all of that, I'm happy to just roll with it. This is very much, you're just thrown in.
Yeah, Earth, let's go.
Yeah, we have no establishment of why. Who's everyone's favourite character?
I feel like it's Mahit. I just feel like she's so interesting as a main character. You get so much of her personality, which can be quite rare for a main character. And she is really just like driving the narrative, but also has no idea what's going on, which is my favourite type of protagonist. I love a good oblivious protagonist.
And she's an oblivious protagonist. It's not her fault that she's oblivious. She was trying very hard to be knowledgeable, but she is oblivious.
No, like specifically like protagonists where like they are trying so hard, but everyone else is withholding information. I love those narratives so much. And she's just so funny.
Yeah, she's been chucked into it underprepared, sabotaged on every end, and is just doing her utmost best.
Same bestie. So I think it has to be Mahit. But I'm open to other cases, like 12 Azalea. I love him.
He's just a vibe. He's just so good a guy.
He's just like, yeah, core intrigue. We're gonna like drop off uncoded secret messages. Ha ha ha. Did not end well for him.
I loved him, but I felt, I don't know, there was something about him that made me go, you're gonna die? And therefore I didn't attach myself to him fully. I thought he was either gonna die or do like a betrayal, but then I moved on to the side of die, because I was like, he's not going to betray them. There was something about it. I was like, this man, he's not gonna live to the end of this novel. There's no way. So.
I feel like he could be important in a sort of haunting the narrative way in book 2, considering there's a lot of loose threads of him being like maybe involved with political insurrection, not really fully developed on that, and I'm like, there's more here.
I have to also stand up for Iskander, because I loved him haunting the narrative to begin with, sort of.
I adore that, but also I was going to say I do enjoy the rogue energy of someone who's like, my station doesn't necessarily have anything we can actually offer, and I'm falling in love with people.
Left, right, and centre.
But we got to try our best here, besties, to make sure that I get my interests met and my homes met, and don't screw over the people. He's trying his best, and he's just himself sideways. There's multiple instances of Mahit being like, you slept with this person
Again, another one.
again, and I feel it with my endocrine system. What? You're not being helpful. You're just being an issue right now. And so he haunts the narrative in more meaningful ways than that, but I find that amusing, which also makes me enjoy him.
I'm so glad we got him back. I was devastated when he was gone. I missed him, like Mahit missed him. I was like, please, he's so funny, bring him back. And then he came back. We got 2. Even better.
We got 2, which was also so fun seeing the same character interact with themselves at different ages.
I love perspective nonsense and like dream logic kind of stuff. And the scene when they're sort of like in Mahit's head and they're all first personing ish. You don't know who is who is who is who, and they're all kind of each other. Oh yeah. Give me that spicy narrative. Give me that cool framing device.
Again, very simple descriptions with the idea of, turning inwards to look at somebody and then turning away from somebody, but then obviously that's a metaphorical turning away. Very simply but artfully done, I think. Anna, do you have a favourite, or are you all on?
I'm very basic. I like the 3 mains. I like 3 Seagrass.
She's so funny as well.
She's so funny. Opens up with a joke, I think, if I'm recalling correctly. Maybe the second line she says. And is just like, wants to do this job, wants so wholeheartedly to be good at this job. And she's doing her best.
She's got that vainglorious ambition. Love that for her.
Exactly.
It's so sweet at the end when she's like, I'm still your cultural liaison if you want. And Maha's like, no, I support your career. Go.
We love to see partners supporting each other.
Exactly.
Does that mean that Maha gets a new cultural liaison in book 2? Who knows?
Mm.
But then maybe they can be on more like equal footing now, because like they're not like working for each other. They're working with each other.
Yeah, it's interesting because I said power imbalance, didn't I? And I feel like there is one, but it's not really that big.
It's in both directions, kind of. Because 3 Seagrass is sort of her assistant, but also controls all access she has to anything, at the beginning at least. They're reliant on each other to get anywhere, kind of.
I feel like 3 Seagrass ultimately has most of the power in this situation, but still, they're both like a C together, so it doesn't really feel like there's power imbalance, because they're both just like, what's going on?
We're in the same boat.
I have a question to put to the group, though.
Mm-hmm.
See, this is a bit of a pet peeve for me, which I was a bit disappointed by, but at the same time, I don't know. I feel like it's the grief kiss, whatever you call that trope, when someone has just died and then 2 other people start making out about it. And it very much happens here. And I was just curious how you 2 felt about it.
Yeah, I feel like it's not very comforting to be kissed, because you're like, I'm having a moment.
Particularly for if you know somebody, like if you're already in a relationship, then I feel like it's a bit different.
But if it's the first one,
I feel like a hug makes more sense, you know?
Yeah.
kissing is not the be-all, end-all of romance.
Because I liked their development otherwise, but that, I felt like that was a little bit of like we need it to happen and there's so much going on, so let's just like quickly.
I feel like they could have had like a farewell scene when Mahit goes back to Elsul. That could have been like a good moment to have a kiss. To be like, in case I never see you again, smooch.
But that's a different vibe to a relationship then.
Yeah, but they're not really in a relationship. This is just sort of like, we have to say that they were definitely being sapphic, so we're going to have them kiss. And I feel like if you can do that better than the grief kiss, as Soren says. The grief kiss.
The grief kiss. I don't think that's maybe there's a name for this trope, but I feel like it happens often enough that I'm like, this is a pattern that I am not a fan of. Does anyone have notes that they were like, I want to talk about this?
I've got a couple of quotes.
Give us some quotes.
There is, Taratz believes, a kind of inevitability to empire unchecked. I liked that one. Nice and haunting to start the prelude. And then there's also, there was nothing safe. There were only gradations of exposure to danger, which I feel like that is the entirety of Mahit's experience in this book.
Yeah.
You're not going to be safe no matter what you do, because there's so many different sides to this. Also, the concept of holographic graffiti, I've just seen that now. I thought that was fascinating.
The fact that you have to walk through it.
Exactly.
Extremely cool.
It's just such a cool idea to just drop there as a piece of side. It never comes up again, I don't think.
I don't think so, but there's so much you could do with it. Like, if you can you just hologram like a dark corridor? That could be extremely dangerous, really. How to hologram, I want to know. The implication to me is that it's light, and therefore that wouldn't work, but even then, can you just, like as a civil disobedience thing, if you just make a corridor blindingly filled with light?
There's just implications all over this world building that there's just so much is thought through, and how various bits of technology would develop and how that would affect everything else. And the everything else is dropped in, so you know it's been thought about, but it's not important, so it doesn't take up time. And it's very nicely conveyed world building, and I really like this book, guys.
It just feels very natural. Little things like the difference between the buildings in the Palace District and the Sticks when they go out to do illegal brain surgery. And the way that even like the fonts are old-fashioned, I think, is what Martin notices. And I was like, that's so specific, but I love it, because it is the kind of thing that just implies the history in a way that even like a statue of an old historical figure doesn't. It's very implicit.
And especially given the way the culture works, it's also implicit in the way that a statue is to us, I reckon.
So I do want to draw attention to one quote, which is, no algorithm was innocent of its designers, just because I really loved that theme, and that was a fun encapsulation of it. And I felt like it was kind of, this came out in 2019, which feels particularly like right now with the whole AI art and AI writing. I mean, I know that algorithms have been used to make some much more terrifying and, I don't know, high in human cost decisions previously already, but it feels like it's even more in the public zeitgeist at the moment, and it's very interesting to see it being interrogated in this way, and particularly it being linked to the person that made it. I think, oh God, what's the name of Elon Musk's stupid new one?
Oh, his robot, what, Greg?
Grok. But as we're recording this, Elon Musk just made Grok as like the anti-woke AI, and then because of the data it was trained on, it was saying things like, yeah, trans women are women, and then he just went in and changed it, which I think is just such an obvious encapsulation of how that bias. That's too obvious, because I feel like this is also a bit more about like, well, I guess it's not too obvious in terms of Tim Pearl is using it for his own ends, but in terms of like implicit bias, I don't know. I liked that this was touched on. I'm concerned it will only become more and more relevant as time goes on.
Yes. Yeah.
I love the epics and the sort of all the classical stuff and the allusions to sort of like Roman-esque world building with like all of the histories and the writers. I really specifically, this is like a really specific thing, but Pseudo 13 River is like such a cool thing to me, because I want to say we have Pseudo Herodotus, but I could just be lying. But the idea is the pseudo, it doesn't mean that Pseudo 13 River is their name. It just means this might have been 13 River who wrote this. So we're gonna just tack on pseudo as part of the like name, because we cannot factually attribute it, but it's probably that. And I just love that teeny tiny bit of like, yeah, we have this historical writer, 13 River. This epic matches the tone of stuff that they wrote. Therefore, best guesses. It's like a teeny tiny thing, but I was just like, oh, that I really like that.
That's cool. I didn't know that was what that meant.
Yeah.
It's flush with all of these implications of like people who are studying it, like people trying to attribute things to Sappho or translate fragments. Like this obviously exists in that universe, particularly in this universe, because it would be a particularly important role. And then you have this like immediate imagination of all of these people who do this job and are sitting around being like, oh, I think this is 13 River, and you know that archivist who's like, it definitely isn't, it's definitely this other poet.
All of the like in universe like academic rivals would be having so much fun. It'd be so good.
Such a meaty job.
I want to know more about Texiclani clubbing though, because it gets brought up once as the thing that Three Seagrass does. What's the music like?
Oh my god, that could be so much fun.
They already have sick cocktails apparently, so
they have like rap battles and stuff like that.
Oh my god, you know what? Surely. That's basically dueling in this universe, right?
Yeah.
Oh.
This is a really random quote, but I feel like it really encapsulates the dry humour of the book. And it's like towards the very end, it goes, That's the station saved then, Mahit said to the ceiling. Iskander's garish and lovely painting of all of Elsel space as seen from Teixkalan was the only thing that hurt her, and she could take its silence as mockery. I just love that. She's like, oh, that's the station saved then. The thing we've been trying to do this whole time. Okay.
And then being juxtaposed with that view of the universe from Teixkalani eyes as like, you've made a tiny dent in nothing.
Yes. No matter what you do, the world is huge, and the world is the empire, is the city, is the world.
So, Soren, final thoughts?
I really loved this. I had a really good time. I think if I had one complaint, I would like it to be weirder. It's already very weird, but I feel like she could have pushed it further, you know? Give us some poetry in the actual prose. I don't even know what I'm asking for specifically, which is a bit of a vague complaint.
More experimental.
More experimental, and it's very experimental already. I acknowledge that. I did love how they did the bits with the imago, but I feel like there could have been some really weird stuff going on there, and I wish it had been. But that's nitpicking, and I absolutely adored this, and I would highly recommend it. And I think it's a beautiful encapsulation of a lot of complex themes simultaneously.
I really enjoyed this book. I am so glad I got to discuss it with the two bookiest people I know, and that you seem to enjoy it as well, because I haven't heard Morgan's review yet. But there's nothing quite like reading a book and knowing that you know someone who will love the concept and how everything is portrayed in it, and be like, I want them to read this and enjoy it, and then having that work. And also, like, just I'm sure I've said it multiple times in this recording, but I adore the way this is written, and I'd love to see a snapshot of that world, just with the way they speak as well. Just because the book is brilliantly written, the concept of the language that we only see glimpses of is fascinating to me, and I'd love to see more of it. Which means I should read the sequel, but
Well, have you not yet?
No, I have it on my bookshelf, but I haven't had time to dig into it.
I'm going to finish it before you.
You are.
Morgan, would you like to finish this off?
God, I love this book. It was so good. I loved all the poetry things. I did feel like if you haven't studied poetry a lot, you might be a little bit lost as to some of the things. But I loved it because I was like, I understand what's going on. I'm having a great time. This is based in my knowledge base, and it's like world building as well. And I love very like innovative world building that really digs into like how everything is shaped, because you get a lot of like fairly like surface world building in a lot of books, which is not necessarily bad if that's not what you're doing with the book and you just need a setting for the characters. But if that is so integral to the plot, which I argue that most of the time it should be, as somebody who's currently writing an essay about world building and magic systems and how they feel plots. But yeah, I love this. I'm so glad I've read it. I'm glad that I've now finally read it after owning it for like 4 years. I'm glad that our mutual friend Gemma can stop bullying me, because we lived together for a year and she really tried to get me to read it in that year, and I was not having a good time. So I was like, I need to save this when I'm in a good headspace. And it's been 2 years since then, so she can finally rest. So yeah, loved it. Will be recommending it. Top marks. A lot of people in the staff room at work were like, oh, you're reading that? I've been meaning to read that for ages. Is it good? And I was like, yes! Read it! Read it, Mr. Bookshop Manager, please.
To full people that loved A Memory Called Empire, just as we did, do you have any recommendations?
I mean, I'm going to start with my singular recommendation I give for anything sci-fi, because I don't read that much sci-fi, considering this is a sci-fi fantasy pod. If you like lots of like good commentary, world building, and like dry wit characters, the Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells, which I just recently, literally last week, in the middle of reading this, I took time out to marathon the first 4 Murderbot books in like 7 hours because I was just feeling insane.
I saw you doing that on Goodreads. It's like, are they okay?
And they hit as well as they did the first time, possibly better, because now I understood the characters. And that's got a lot of good sort of like communication-based stuff, because the main character communicates mainly with other bots. I'll hand over the floor so I can percolate.
My issue for recommending a sci-fi book is that most of the ones that I read when I was younger and adore the world building of have actually quite problematic authors, so I don't know how I feel about recommending them.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
We can recommend things with caveats.
I enjoyed the first couple of Mistborns. I never got around to finishing them. That's a bit of sci-fi fantasy. It might be closer to fantasy. Ender's Game, goes off track after the first one in the main series. But the Shadow series, which follows Bean, has some really fun, interesting world building, but also caveats of you can see the prejudices in the author in the way that a lot of characters are written. If you can get past that, there's some interesting plot happening. But don't put yourself through that if you don't want to.
Soren.
I have recommendations that I'm giving without caveats today, I think. However, they are both things that I've mentioned on the show before, so whoops, sorry. First of all, we've totally done a whole episode on this, so maybe you've read it if you're listening to this, but In the Watchful City by S. Jai Liu. If you want some sci-fi that does blend with fantasy, as Morgan predicted, and you want a lot of interesting world building and cultural dissonance stuff, and some in-universe documents in the form of a little epistolary side story in there, and you want like a intelligent city that people are somewhat beholden to due to strange speculative technology, definitely read In the Watchful City. Oh, and poetry. How can I forget poetry? If you want poetry, In the Watchful City. I'm really said what it's about. It is about a person who is tapped into a organic city and tasked with protecting it, and then somebody else turns up and is like, hey, I'm going to tell you a bunch of stories and teach you about yourself. Other recommendation, I feel like everyone's read it at this point, but I was thinking about it the whole time I was reading this, so I feel like I have to mention it. Babel by Arthur Kwang. Imperialism, language, they're shaking hands. Particularly also the dedication made me think of Babel, this push and pull between loving a culture and being destroyed by it and feeling isolated by it and being unloved by it. That was very pertinent to Babel. And a brief explanation of Babel is it is speculative historical fantasy in which the dissonance between translations can create magic, and therefore the British Empire is incentivized to gather up a bunch of native speakers from different countries and bring them into Oxford so that they can use their translation skills to power machinery, drive industry, etc. And it follows a boy who was taken from his family at a young age by an English professor who had the idea of putting him into this system. I feel like a lot of the themes that are explored in this are also explored in that, but in a caveating in the way that we talked about this when we were like, well, the propaganda is fake and therefore not that depressing. Because Babel is based on real history, it is very depressing. So
Sobbed into my pasta listening to that audiobook. Devastated. Emotionally hollow.
But it's beautiful.
I have one more recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
If you like language-based world building / magic system, A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. Specifically also the later books in that trilogy really grapple with sort of like the ethics of the world building and how it has been structured and how it leaves behind people who are not able to access it, and how it like empire is built on the backs of people, and it takes that quite far and literally in an interesting way, which you really won't see coming, and it's really, really good.
Anna.
Oh, hi.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to have been here. I'm so glad we got to do this book.
Is there anything you want to plug?
The Attic Monologues is a brilliant podcast written by a brilliant person and coordinated by even more brilliant people, because that includes the writer as well. And you should go listen to it. It's fun.
Yeah. If you like the destruction of empires, you'll like the Attic Monologues.
If you like language free, if you like meta systems, if you like an intelligent person writing an intelligent plot, if you like queer people, I mean, if you don't like queer people, why are you here? If you like queer people, you kind of got to listen to it.
So next time, I will be forcing Soren to read Frontier by Grace Curtis.
I'm so excited because I read Floating Hotel by Grace Curtis and really enjoyed it. I'm ready for more sapphics in space.
That's very exciting. I'm not going to say anything more about it, except it has a quote by Tamsin Wire on the cover. And I feel like that is a good pitch. It's the only pitch I needed, so that's how I'm going to pitch it to the listeners.
That's coming out on the 10th of June.
Until then, you're always welcome through the bookcase.
Don't forget to scratch the cat on your way out. Thank you for listening to The Hidden Bookcase, a production of Planar Prod. On this episode you heard Anna LeClair, Morgan Greensmith and Soren Brywood, with additional editing by Kit Lovick, discussing A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine. You can find out more about this book and keep up with her at arkadymartine.net. A huge thank you to Anna for joining us for this episode. You were legendary. You can hear her editing work on Season 1 of queer horror podcast The Attic Monologues, also produced by Planar Prod. To find out more, visit planarprod.com. You can find The Hidden Bookcase on Twitter at Hidden Bookcase and on Instagram, Facebook, Tumblr and TikTok at Hidden Bookcase Podcast. Know what we should read next, or want to chat to us about what you thought of this episode's read? You can reach us at thehiddenbookcase@gmail.com, send us a DM on social media, or come chat with your fellow bookworms in our growing Discord server. The link is in the show notes. Want to support The Hidden Bookcase? Support us on Patreon for bonus episodes, outtakes, playlists, and other extras. Buy a book through our bookshop.org page linked in the show notes, or consider leaving us a rating or review or telling a friend how to find us. Your whispers are the best way for bookworms to discover our show. For our next episode, which will be out on Monday, the 3rd of June, we'll be discussing Frontier by Grace Curtis. We hope to see you then, and in the meantime, you're always welcome through the bookcase.